Hello again, I'm Reginaldo Haslett-Marroquin, and I have the pleasure, honor, and privilege of moderating this last panel. It's about regenerative financing. What does it look like? How do we understand it? And here in front of us is a distinguished panel. And just to frame this whole conversation, and to also walk you through the format here, it's going to be very informal, except each one of them is going to present their program as they see it fit to the convergence, to the audience here. I'm going to start with quick introductions. After the quick introductions, I'll do a quick framing, and then we'll go back. Each of them is going to present, and then right away, ask questions. If nobody asks questions, I will ask a few questions that are relevant to the convergence and to what they do. Sounds good? Like a plan? Everybody, yay? Okay, yay. So we'll start with Calla Rose on the other end, and full disclosure, Calla Rose runs together with Terra Smith-Schweibel, Terra Regenerative Capital, and they are the lead investors in our current Tree Range Farms seed capital raise.
Thanks, Rehi. My name is Calla Rose Ostrander, and we are the lead investors in Tree Range Seed Raise. We believe that flexible capital plus development services can support the growth of businesses that are key to small and mid-scale farmers accessing value-add markets. So we specifically look for businesses in aggregation, processing, manufacturing, and distribution.
Okay, my name is Thao. I'm with Compeer Financial. We're part of the Farm Credit System. There's about 70 associations across the country, including Puerto Rico. At Compeer, I help manage a program called Emerging Markets. So we work with farmers who direct market the product to consumer. So we're, owned by the farmer and rancher because we're structured as a co-op. And so, for example, Tree Range is the owner of Compeer, for example. And so I'm excited to be part of this, food system and being a lending partner.
Hi everyone, I'm Aaron Blythe. I work for the Latino Economic Development Center as the Director of Agriculture, and I always say I'm not the greatest representation of LEDC. We're definitely a Latino-led organization. I'm the only white staff member of about, I think 17 or 18 now, plus 10 board members, so it's very much a Latino-led organization. We're a CDFI, and so we do lending to the Latino community in Minnesota. We're based out of St. Paul. We've been doing agriculture for about 10 years now, and in the last 5 years kind of focused more on the lending side. We're still pretty small. We've done about $1 million worth of loans to about 42 producers over the last 5 years, and done about another $500,000 in grants to producers in that time period. And really in the last year I've started to look at how do we have done a lot of technical assistance services as well as lending, and now we're kind of looking at how do we refocus our efforts on lending to get money out there to the Latino community.
And if you don't know what a CDFI is, it's a Community Development Financial Institution. It's a federal classification that allows a nonprofit like LEDC to take money from different sources and then use it, operate it as a bank, lend it, and collect interest and things like that.
Good afternoon. My name is David Lazaks. I'm a senior fellow at Croatan Institute. We're a nonprofit based in Durham, North Carolina, although I live in Madison, Wisconsin. And we leverage finance to create the pathways to a just economy. And my role within the Institute is this interface between regenerative agriculture and finance. So we do some work that's mostly on the kind of research and report writing. We've written reports on how capital could be used in the transition to more regenerative agriculture, investing in regenerative ag infrastructure, looking at connections between human health, looking at risk, all of these different factors that we think are important to help to flow more patient, flexible, and non-extractive capital to grow this ecosystem. And while also doing that, we do some pieces on policy and also are looking at developing new financial mechanisms that we see can help to really advance the flow of that kind of capital into this space.
Thank you. So anywhere you go now, there is regenerative something. I'm just waiting for the regenerative chairs to come into the market now. That's how whitewashed this whole idea has become. Now, at the REA tree range, at this ecosystem where we are, we have become very good at reframing and at framing what it actually is to be regenerative, not to define it, but what is it to be? What is and what is not regenerative? For in our eyes, something either is or is not regenerating. Whether you call it regenerative, label it, market it like that, whatever, it doesn't matter. It either regenerates or it doesn't. It's a very simple thing. So how do we go about framing? I mean, for us, it was about agriculture, and yeah, you know about all the poultry and all the, how we have framed all of this space, and General Mills using some of the language we have developed and all of that in the indigenous language, and you can on and on for a while. Oh, how do you make money regenerative? It's literally probably the most difficult question we could ask in the space of regeneration. Yet, there is a way to look at it. So, this is not, we didn't ask them to frame their regenerative capital or impact capital or solidarity capital or however they call it. We simply think that whatever they are doing, it's 1,000,000 times better than most of what we have encountered. That's why this panel is here. It is said that there is now, I don't know, $20 billion, $2 billion, depending on who you ask, of regenerative capital out there. But if you're a regenerative farmer in our system, or as us tree range farms representing the supply chain of those farmers, we don't see the checks, right? And we get taken out frequently on these goose hunts, spend literally thousands of dollars of our time, sometimes travel, come back and still no checks. But yet, there's billions of dollars, right? But what's the difference? Only a tiny percentage of that pool of capital out there is actually interested in regeneration. The rest of it is interested in using regeneration as a way to make more money, extract more money, and degenerate the planet even more, honestly. That is the cold truth. So how do we frame that then? For us, in our ways, we always go back to the source of all wisdom and all knowledge, the innate intelligence that we are born with, which aggregated with the wisdom from our ancestors and our communities gives us what we call the indigenous intelligence or the indigenous intellect. From that indigenous intellect, you can frame almost everything that is going on around you. And so, in this spirit, and with all respect to our ancestors and the current generation working in this space, the way we think about it is the following. The earth, Pachamama, Mother Earth, however you call it, is the source of all of the well-being that any one of us can expect. It's the food, it's the air, it's the water, it's the wood for the buildings, for the floors. Everything has come from that space. And there's this diagram I saw once where there is a pile of money going on one end, and then there is one line goes to the forest, another one goes to the minerals, another one goes to all of the things that Mother Earth has had, or had originally, being taken and turned it into money. So, fundamentally, we have been extracting the Mother Earth, as the source of all of this wealth that we now have everywhere. Have been extracting her, haven't fed her, haven't nourished her, haven't taken care of her. We just keep sucking her dry over and over to the point that she has become so sick, she started stopping to feed us and started to resist and started to whack us around because that can't feed us anymore, can't sustain us anymore. So for us, regenerative capital has 3 stages. One is the stage where you feed the mother again and don't expect her to produce milk yet. That's the first stage. If without that initial capital return, that health return to the mother, she can't even start moving or start thinking again or start figuring anything out. The second stage is where she feels better again, and now we can at least break even, say, we put some in, we take some out, and we are even, but not deteriorating her anymore. And then she continues to get healthier. Like in the Forest Stewardship Council systems, where you harvest 90% of the total annual growth of a forest, and you leave 10%, meaning your forest grows 10% every year in terms of diameters and wealth. No different than that. And then the third stage is when the mother is healthy again, and I hope we reach that point where that map that Dan Hernandez showed is back into those original colors or close to that. And at that point, the mother again produces so much wealth, we can go and live happily ever after again. So think about those three stages, and then let's think about what our panelists are going to introduce us to their programs, not to judge them, but to actually frame and understand this space so that, together we can create a new narrative that we can actually get behind. So we're going to start with Calla Rose in the end, and then, we started very late, so we are already 8 minutes into our panel, and we're fighting against the movie, so I'm assuming we're going to have to finish on time. So because of that, we'll say, what do you think, 10, 20, 30, 40, so 10 minutes or so. If you can finish before, that's great, but the idea is let's hear them out, hear their programs, what they're doing, how they're doing it. They're going to try to connect it to how it applies to you here, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Short on time.
So 3 minutes each.
No, we have, what time is it? Am I reading that? It's 3:30.
3:30, yeah.
Right, so we have until 4, correct? Correct me if I'm wrong?
Yes, 4
Yes.
o'clock.
Okay, so we got 30 minutes.
Did you want time for questions too?
Yeah.
Yes, so that would be 5 minutes. Let's do 5 minutes, and then we'll go back to that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the story. That's how we all learn together, these stories. Thanks for being a storyteller, and for us to all collectively put our energy towards that story. I have been in the agriculture and climate change space for probably 9 years. Prior to that, I worked in climate policy. And I just moved over to the financing or investing side of it about 1.5 years ago. Prior to that, I worked in government with philanthropists and with communities, grassroots community organizing to move money and policy and shift practice, primarily in rangelands and with compost production in the Southwest. So very different landscape than up here. I spent 1 year with the state of California helping them design and roll out their Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart program, which was an executive order from Governor Newsom. And I left that to work full-time with Terra Smith, who had spent about 2 years really looking at this space very deeply and trying to understand how capital could both come in a way that wasn't philanthropic, but that could also do it in such that it catalyzed a transition towards these practices that we call regenerative, without being extractive. So she set a pretty high bar. And we worked off and on together for 2.5 years before we started this full time. We're about 3 years in now, and Tree Range is our first investment. We've diligenced, yay. So we also recognize that a lot of businesses in this sector are maybe not at a stage where they're ready for investment yet, or they are ready, but they need to get different pieces lined up. So we went through a rebranding exercise with Tree Range that Todd helped with, and a company called Little. They restructured the company legally. So we kind of see ourselves as a bridge between what more traditional capital might be looking for and where communities of farmers or entrepreneurs may be in their business. And some of the things that we look for are, what is the potential if this system succeeds? Like, what does it look like when it grows up? And what would that impact be? So really, what are the climate and social, economic impacts that the organization will have, not right now, not next year, but when it grows up? And of course, we can't see them all, but we look for that, what we might call scalability, but replicability as well. And then also, of course, the financial returns. And this is where I'll just get on a soapbox for like a second. A lot of the times in my field, people say they're looking for returns in the high teens to 20s. And that's very high. And I think venture capital has skewed folks' idea of what an investment can be. If you look at the S&P 500, its average 10-year return is 9.9%. If you look across portfolios of family offices that invest, they may get between 6 and 15%. So this idea that we're all benchmarking to in the financial community of, wow, you know, we need to get high teens and 20s, or we're going to get these massive returns, is all skewed towards a couple of very large wins that happened in the tech sector in the last 20 years. And that has kind of given us and also towards things that are operated more in a traditional pyramid, like the oil and gas industry, which tends to, this doesn't exclude like liquefied gases, but the drilling is financed by new money coming in that finances new money coming in, and they're not actually making money on the wells. So we're trying to look at what are the companies that are going to make money in the long term, and then what are the policies that the government can shift to ensure and de-risk that time period in which they're not going to make money. Because as we all know, agriculture is a slow growing space, and it should be allowed the time and space to grow, as Rehi said, to restore, to get back to sustenance before anybody goes to try to take anything out of it, including capital. So that's just a little bit of a background. It's kind of wide reaching. But I think the other thing I wanted to just mention is that farmers are the most over debt leveraged population in the country, more than any other industry. And if you don't know that, you should, because it's a tragedy, and it's driving a lot of depression and other suicidal tendencies in farming communities. So we don't believe that equity belongs in individual farms, although there may be arrangements where land is purchased and pooled, and Iroquois Valley has some great examples of this, where it can work, but it usually is extractive. So what we're trying to do is invest in that market access so that you as a farmer or people as farmers can get higher value to gain entrance to markets that are generally dominated or supported by commodity systems. So it's a theory of change, and we are looking for other investors who are willing to invest in that theory of change as well. And we had the luxury of really looking at it and taking our time over several years to really identify that space. So we're very excited. We plan to be a long-term partner with Tree Range, and I personally have not seen a system. Most of our systems that we look at are adjacent. You know, that 4-square box, and you're right here in the bottom right, and you want to get to the upper left, because this is like the current reality, and this is the sexy, glorious future where everything is amazing. And oftentimes, what we want in an altruistic or movement like the environmental movement or something, or in the capitalist movement, is we want to go from bottom right to upper left. And you just can't. You have to move in an adjacent square. So a lot of our investments are in that adjacent box. Most of them are. What's wonderful about Tree Range, it's not even in a box. It's just like a whole other ecosystem. And we really love that there's a design out there that can now be ready for the entrance of private equity, but to be ready in a way that's going to be healthful for the system. I'll just leave it there.
Okay, I'll try to keep it short here. So I mentioned earlier, my name's Thao, and I, before joining Farm Credit, I worked for a CDFI, a Community Development Financial Institution, where I provide, technical assistance and loan to small businesses. So when I joined Farm Credit, we actually went through a merger about a couple of years ago, and started this program called Emerging Markets. One of the reasons why we do that is, Farm Credit mission is to serve all of agriculture in rural community, whether you're big, small, whether you're conventional ag or diversified, specialty crop operation, managed grazing. And so we noticed that a lot of these, emerging market type of operation do not fit conventional, ag underwriting guidelines. And so we created the emerging market where our core or centerpiece is around a microloan that goes up to $75,000, where we actually able to match the USDA FSA interest rate. So those are very low. A couple years ago, it was like 3%. I think today is slightly under 4.85, or somewhere around there. So we can match that. And the reason why we do that is make sure that, it help these operation cash flow. In addition to that, we also give a grant up to $1,500. Part of that is for, these emerging entrepreneur, like to call it, farmers, to attend workshop like this or get the education they need to, grow and expand the operation. At the same time, also purchase technology, whether it's QuickBook or whether, create an online store. And so that's the program I've been, managing. Like I said, our portfolio is made up of all types of operation. We have a good number of vegetables and fruits operation, agritourism. We have some indoor farm. We have some organic operation, including regenerative is one of them. And so we're able to take, like I said, our higher risk in this area, whereas we don't take on a lot of equity because a lot of lender, it's all based on equity and cash flow. So for us, we do look at cash flow, but we don't take the equity where a lot of emerging farmers don't have. And another thing that I want to address, we do a lot of our work, the emerging markets type work through partnership. So we partner with a lot of organizations, including Regenerative Agriculture Alliance, Race Group, Tree Range, Latino Economic Development Center, and a number of other ethnic organizations that we work closely with. And so, in addition to that, I just want to throw another piece out there. We also provide 1% of our annual net profit as a grant that we give up to the community. And part of that is to help rural community in terms of, for example, if there's a region that want to explore a meat processing facility, we can give up to $5,000 to help with that feasibility study grant. So I just want to kind of throw that out there. Yeah.
Yeah, so my background's actually in agriculture. I did about 16 years of managing small organic vegetable farms, and then spent 5 years or so as a director of a small farmers co-op in the Twin Cities. And then just in the last 3 years, came over to LEDC and started off kind of mostly focused on understanding technical assistance for farmers, but has been gradually understanding this whole finance game as well, which has been a fairly important piece for a lot of the farmers in our network. So I'm kind of excited to be on this panel because I don't actually consider myself a financial guy in most regards. But that said, what we're doing at LEDC is very much on the ground work. So we're working with folks, Latino and other BIPOC, largely Latino, but we have done, of the 42 loans, about 12 of them have been some Hmong growers, a couple black growers in the Twin Cities, and some East African growers. But we're most concerned about is, how do we get folks access to capital who don't tend to get access to capital in our society. About half of our growers are ITIN users. They don't have social security numbers. And so we're able to help get them access to be able to buy their land or get access to capital for tractors. And a big piece of being a CDFI, so what makes us different, we work a lot with Compeer. Most of the growers that we work with, they need at a minimum 20 hours of technical assistance to get them a $20,000 loan or a $5,000 or $10,000 loan. We're helping them think about how to build their credit, kind of introducing them to the first ideas of what financial paperwork might look like for a loan application. And so we have to do quite a bit of walking them through that entire process, which is very expensive for us to do. But it's absolutely essential if we want to open our society up, open up regenerative agricultural spaces to folks who can't just go into a bank and get access to that funding. A really clarifying moment for me was about 3 years ago, it was the middle of July or August, I think, and it was a pretty rough growing year. And I had a good friend of mine who's white, who has a farm, who needed access to capital for his farm. He was struggling with figuring that out and ended up figuring out a deal with his in-laws to buy half his farmland and keep it going, which was incredible. And then we had a farmer who's a friend of mine, Latino, who was struggling with something that was happening in Mexico with his family and was looking at having to pay out about $30,000 that nobody should have to pay out. I won't go into details, to try to fix what was happening in Mexico. And that's some of the disparity that we see fairly consistently. And so we're trying to figure out how do we get folks help who need help in that way. And it's slow work and it's difficult work, but I think one of the key things that we've identified is, most of the farmers that we work with, all the farmers we work with, I think Secretary Vilsack said recently, 85% of all U.S. farmers make more money off farm than they do on farm. So we need to be honest about that. Within our network, that's 100%. And so one of the things that we're looking at is how do we help folks find models that work on their farm that isn't going to take 20 hours or 10 hours a day through the growing season in Minnesota while they're also trying to work on the local dairy farm or the meat processing plant. We need systems that say, okay, they can wake up and work for a couple hours or an hour to get the animals fed, maybe do something in the evening, but that still brings in some cash flow for them. And that's where I think Rehi's system and this tree range, we've been working with you all for a couple of years now, and it really is a model that we see as really viable. There's still things to work out, obviously, but the farmers that we've worked with in this model, it really is a viable way for them to hold their off-farm job, start building an on-farm enterprise that brings in some money and that has some growth potential. And so really, we're pretty excited about that and excited to be here working with you all.
So maybe I'll start by continuing the theme of some of the folks on this panel by saying that I came to the world of finance through a PhD in environmental science, which is a clear pathway, of course, to being on stage talking about finance. But for me, it was learning about systems and systems thinking and looking at how capital and finance as a tool to create change within a system. And it was by accident that I ended up kind of being interested in finance. Was originally invited to write a white paper with a colleague who was working at a large bank at the time around investing in agriculture. And I said, I don't know anything about investing, but I can do the agriculture piece. And it was through that where I was able to apply my kind of systems thinking lens to this intersection between these two spheres and realizing what the power was to be able to use capital as a tool to make these shifts towards a different system that I think we're all working towards. And now at Croatan Institute, I'm thankful to be kind of in community with a bunch of, whether it's academic refugees or finance system refugees who those places weren't working for them, and we all get to work together. So one of my colleagues who's a historian and who actually studied the history of finance for his PhD, reminded us around some of the historical terms that we use that are now commonplace in finance and whose meanings have really changed over time. So, for instance, bonds, that is a common tool within finance, means it's something that connects us. And equity, another term that's often used in finance, including some of the deals that have been mentioned today and throughout this week, equity means fairness. And that's not something that we usually equate those terms to really mean in whether it's in agriculture or within finance or in any other sector as it relates to using those tools in the mainly capitalist systems that we're embedded within today. And the way we at Croatan Institute and the colleagues that we work with look at that is from a lens of how we can begin to not only reimagine capitalism, but reimagine the interlinkages between how we steward the land, how agriculture is used as a land stewardship means and mode, and what that means for our communities, what that means for our health, what that means for all the things that we value. And if there's one thing that the finance system is really good at is really beginning to value risk. And to say that, is this activity risky? Is it not risky? How can I begin to value that? And we've seen in many cases using kind of traditional finance mechanisms that so much of what is externalized, mainly from conventional agriculture, ends up on somebody else's balance sheet, whether that's related to climate change, whether that's related to human health and the almost 20% of our gross domestic product that we spend now on healthcare. We've seen now, and colleagues at Rockefeller Foundation and other research partners have demonstrated through some research that there are these huge costs, huge true costs to our agricultural system. And what is exciting for me and what is exciting in the work that I get up to do every day is to begin to rethink this relationship between how capital is a tool, and not more than that, but capital is a tool to begin to rethink how we begin to change those relationships, begin to bring the meaning back around fairness and connection, and capital as really a tool to help to rebuild, to help to build resilience, not only within our agricultural communities, within the landscape, and we see here, I think, with this ecosystem that is being built around regenerative poultry, that we're not seeing just another example of an investment going to vertical integration that's going to build another large, probably relatively a not very resilient company that's not internalizing all of those true costs, but allows us within, I think, more of an ecosystem model that's really being pioneered here of how appropriate forms of finance can be used to demonstrate that there's benefits for people, for the planet, and for all of the different communities that are involved in these discussions. And I think that takes innovation that we're seeing with different types of transactions, whether it's grants, whether it's types of investments, whether it's technical assistance, that can really all be used together in different forms to be able to show how capital as a tool can be used to, whether it's buy the birds or the processing facility or create new brands or demonstrate how these products are more nutritious than conventional products that are kept mainly inside and fed a certain type of feed. And I think those are the values that we're seeing that in many cases aren't we don't have dollar signs on them yet. But I think as we're showing that, yes, maybe today the cost of a chicken is higher in a supermarket or on the website or through any of your distributors, but the true cost of that chicken, I'm quite sure, is going to be much lower. And that's something that we're working on embedding in these frameworks around what the true cost of food really is and how we can drive that into these broader societal dialogues so that the better food eventually becomes the cheaper food.
Awesome. So thank you. Think about questions you may want to ask. As you ask them, direct them to a specific person. That way we can be more, direct. So we heard Calla Rose, Terra Regenerative Capital. They are looking at the ag of the middle, so to speak, the infrastructure so that farmers can grow more and companies can deploy so that it's like tree range. We can take those products to market and increase the flow of regenerative products. Thao with Compeer Financial, who have really a diverse portfolio, especially the micro grants up to $75,000. We happen to have one of those. It's very, very attractive terms, supported by the FSA, or at least matching the FSA interest rates, which are very low, subsidized by the government. Aaron Blythe with LEDC. LEDC is a well-established institution here in the state of Minnesota and Wisconsin, Iowa, parts of South Dakota. And they have been looking for, again, microloans and microfinance for a lot of the small business ideas, and sometimes even, as Aaron described, family emergencies that can get in the way and collapse a starting business. And David, who's with the Croatan Institute, and much broader, not specifically lending money. You didn't mention that.
We don't.
But but it's still involved in the reframing of economic systems that define how money is used, how money flows, and how it is assessed in terms of risk. And on a risk perspective, just to put it In other words, I think the riskiest thing anyone can do right now is invest in a system that is bound to collapse. The new systems are the ones without the risk or the lowest risk. So with that, any questions? Start here.
My question is for Sai. Could you talk about what is causing the change within Compeer around regenerative? Is it the regulatory environment or the current administration or in partnership with USDA, or is it your leadership, or is it farmers asking for it? Like, what is compelling Compeer to move farther into regenerative ag as a lending space?
I think it's a little bit of everything that you mentioned. And like I said, a very big part of it is the mission. And we're in the mission to serve all of ag, whether big or small, or whether it's conventional or non-traditional. And I think even before I helped start the program or run it, I know Rahi. He actually introduced his business before I start with farm credit, and that's something in the area that I'm passionate about too as an individual, because I'm a product immigrant farmer, and so with the like I said earlier, we're a lending co-op owned by the farmers and rancher, and so the goal is to help diversify our portfolio or ownership, and hopefully can change the status quo in some fashion.
You? Do you have a question? Any questions?
Could we get that slide up just for a second? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. What? Yes, go ahead.
Have any of you delved into financing worker-owned co-ops?
No.
We have done farmer on co-op. It's sometimes it was started with the community, get challenging, just get smaller to just family members in some ways to make it work.
Yeah, we are officially a co-op development center because we used to do some work with the rural co-op development grant. So we, for a while, had a model where we might find 4 or 5 folks in the same area of Minnesota that wanted to start a farm, and we'd have them pool collectively into a co-op, maybe throw $500 in a piece to kind of get some seed money, which we could leverage for another, maybe a small micro loan to get started. And what we saw for maybe the 8 years we did that is, we weren't doing enough to kind of support the governance structure of that co-op, and so it kind of just fell apart in general. But the good thing that came out of it is it really did kind of weed out who was actually interested in farming and who wasn't, and so you might have 5 people put very little money in, relatively speaking, kind of start a business, get a chance to see really like, is this something that's worth doing or not? And then the ones that were like, yeah, this is what I want to do, ended up kind of moving on to their own farm. So in that way, the model worked. And then we incubated a Shared Ground Farmers Co-op, which was a Latino-owned co-op for marketing. So we were kind of, the height of it, there were about 30 farms involved in it, selling into the Twin Cities to high-end local markets. And it was one of the better ways for us to get farmers who really didn't have the social capital, the language skills or whatever to actually access those high-end markets, which is really the difference between success and non-success as a vegetable farmer, especially a small vegetable farmer. And so we helped incubate that and kind of help run that and get grants for that for about 8 years. And it just closed last year after 8 years. It was averaging about $500,000 in sales every year, which is small, but in the world it was in, it was actually moving into, had some fairly good success. But again, it was hard to get to that next stage where it was actually going to grow to be sustainable. And the good thing about it was the 4 original farm owners had gotten to a point where they could access their own markets. So they felt comfortable saying, let's close it down and just work on our own markets. And they all walked away with some money instead of being in debt. So that was a good thing. But we learned a lot. And it's complicated.
Go ahead.
I want to address something. It's a good strategy for some of the ethnic community, especially for some who are undocumented. You need 1 member to be a citizen to qualify for a loan through Compeer to purchase an asset. So there are a few cases that we have come across where maybe a co-op of 5 farmers, maybe 4 are undocumented. 1 is that brokers can guarantee on behalf of the co-op to obtain financing.
Is anybody here from Shared Ground? I can't identify anyone, but there were a lot of Shared Ground members here earlier. So you could talk to them too. And we can put you in touch with them if you want to elaborate on that. Yes.
Yeah, question for David in regards to subsidies. What role do those play in this transition to regen? How important are they?
I mean, I think there's many market and non-market incentives that are part of the current agricultural system, both in the U.S. and globally. And many of those supports, whether you're talking about insurance, whether you're talking about direct payments, whether you're talking about other formal or even informal supports, heavily favor more conventional agriculture. And as this Farm Bill season ramps up, which we are kind of in the midst of right now, there are some discussions, not too many discussions, about how to begin to shift those or be more inclusive of different kinds of production systems that have high levels of public and private benefit to them that'll help to kind of level that playing field. As right now it's a not very level playing field, but I think we're looking, we're optimistic that in this coming year we're going to see some shifts to those systems.
Yeah, I guess I was just curious of if you just got rid of them, that would help, right? Level the playing field. But how much do we need to shift in our direction to get that momentum?
Can I just say something, which is if you were growing a commodity crop, you could just go to a bank and get a loan. So it's important to understand the way the Farm Bill is structured, which is to de-risk agriculture, but it's de-risking commodities.
Because you can go get an insurance policy on your crop, and then the bank looks at that and says, oh, well, we as a bank are going to get paid either way, whether your thing fails or not.
And there's a built-in market, which happens to also dump on other countries and reservations of Native people, and through our food stamp programs. And it's not all bad. The idea that you have a guaranteed market, the idea that you have guaranteed insurance, those are good ideas. The challenge that anybody faces outside of commodity agriculture is how hard it is to get financing because of the way that those things de-risk the entrance of finance into this space. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And what's the cost of doing business that way right now? We're seeing it. We're seeing it from soil erosion. We're seeing it from climate change. We're seeing it from water. We're seeing it from health. We see what the real costs of those subsidy programs are that generally aren't accounted for in those policy discussions.
And I wanted to put this up here because I loved this slide, Food Ops. Thanks for making it. Because here you can see the regen farms in the blue squares, and then you can see the different products that come off of these farms that REA and the Regenerative Poultry Protocol creates, and that the tree range farms will buy. And when I look at this, I see, oh, these regen farms, they need certain types of money, and different farms need different types of money. Okay, so sometimes they're at-risk producers. Sometimes they're a producer who can go to your bank and get a loan. Great, but those are different kinds of money. And then, okay, the broilers, well, RAA needs certain kinds of money, and the processing facility needs certain kind of money. It needs government grants, it needs nonprofit grants. Eventually, maybe it'll get to a size where it's profitable, and that's part of the development of the system. The elderberries will need processing, they'll need packaging, they'll need washing. So when you look at this ecosystem, what I would encourage you to do if you see yourself in this ecosystem is to understand the types of money that support your parts of it and the other parts of it. Because what we can all do is, even though I'm at a part of this, which is tree range, which you don't even see here, which is where the equity money comes in, I am thinking about all of these pieces, because we're all part of an ecosystem. And if I see something that I'm like, oh, that would be a great fit for this part, then we can share with each other. Oh, if I met this person, I talked to Aaron, I met this person who might be able to reduce your cost of loans to farmers. And that reduced cost of loans means more farmers can come on, which tree range can have more product to sell, which makes the company more profitable.
Rehi, have you taken this slide and put that next level on it of how much capital of what kind, from what potential sources would be needed to actually get these 10 million broilers, and what is that going to mean for this for the financial ecosystem that's coming around to support this?
Yeah, Calla Rose pointed out that the tree range farms financial model is the next stage,
That-
which we
yeah,
also have.
But all the rest of it, it seems like a
Oh,
next step that maybe
yeah.
we can collaborate on.
And
Sounds
we
good.
do have it mapped
After I
out.
replace this.
In fact, we have that, how many coops we need to build, how much that's going to cost, and where the potentials could come. But that is a conversation for after the movies.
We'll get it done,
Basically,
don't worry.
here's the thing. So all of you out here represent many sectors. There is farmers, there is businesses, there is farmers who own businesses, like the Tortilleria Campesina, with Wilbur de la Rosa. He also owns Jubilo Farms. He could be at different places. There is Simples, which is another tree range-like, except next stage, right? We sell to Simples, and they deliver that to consumers, and so on. And here is 4 representatives from 4 different sectors of potential financing. Now, it is for us to figure this out, to connect those dots, to make those connections, and remember that Terra Regenerative Capital, for example, is representative of a whole new movement coming into this space, most of them imposters and illegitimate. But
not that one.
But within those, we have these nuggets like Terra Regenerative who are willing to say publicly what Terra said today and to engage on the basis of those principles and be accountable to all of us, to the farmers, again, to the simple people. And then here is Thao, who has been with us from the beginning relentlessly, connecting. So if you're a farmer, you need a loan for your farm, confidently talk to Thao. It may not work, but it may just work. Do the engagement. And here is Aaron. LEDC has been part of our family of community institutions for a very long time. LEDC understands what's going on. Now, that they are also bound sometimes is true, but they will do everything they can to ensure that we all prosper. And then, David, let's understand that if we want to change some of these other policies and systems, and he's riding the horse with the standard saying, hey,
And one way to help us help farmers and other value chain businesses is to tell us what you need and what kind of finance is going to make it work for the production systems you're doing. And to help us do that, we're actually in the process of a survey that they're using right now. Diane is holding it up in the back of the room.
Yep.
You can just scan that QR code. It's available in English and Spanish. So however you would like to or able to do that, take 5 minutes. For those who we're doing this across the world, or not across the world, across the U.S. right now, we're going to pick a couple of those who submit to give you $500 as a thank you for helping us help you. So Diane has those, and they'll be outside of the table.
$500, all of us, and let's take that money and put it into a farm. Okay? How about we do that? Like, seriously, take your phone, go scan it, go there, let's collect all those $500, and then we'll put 2 or 3 farms, or all the farms, and then we vote in the farms, and that money goes right to them, right?
We'll get you those farms, don't worry.
All right. Well, here's the thing. I'm saying that not just to say it. It's because this is the closing panel. It's about engagement. This capital needs to be flowing. We need to be engaging these folks so that capital is coming in. It's hard work. They don't just write the checks either. They are accountable to other folks behind them. But if we don't engage, we don't learn. If we don't learn, we are always on the sidelines. And if we're on the sidelines, we don't get to stuff even a little stick in the ribs of the whole financial system in this country. And we need a lot of sticks. So thank you.
And they have to be sharp.
And they have to be sharp. So thanks for coming to this awesome and distinguished panel. Let's give him a real